I saw an article come across my feed that confused me just a little bit, and, man, I want to take you back in time to a moment where gay marriage had just been legalized because the Supreme Court had done a ruling on it. Obergefell went through, and Boogie, if any of you remember him, the old YouTuber Boogie, and, you know, K-Fox, if you want to put up a picture of Boogie here for people who might not remember, guy who was known for his persona Francis, who would act like the stereotypical, just mean, angry, and bad Magic the Gathering nerd, went in front of an audience and said, maybe we should have introduced it a little more slowly. And that was kind of the moment that people started turning on him, because people realized, oh, you have a fence up your ass. That's inconvenient. So, I want to bring you back to that time. But first, we have some fan art to get into, and then when we get into that fan art, after we get into that fan art, we'll get into the article that I wanted to talk about. And I love that Discord is opening things in the wrong browser window. Anywho, this is fan art from Zoe. They said, I don't know if it's possible since it involves changing the proportions, but have Goblin Suris originally made it green, but reminded me of Suris, so made a pink variant based on the slime model. Honestly, as much as I think Goblin Suris would be neat and cool, I cannot work to change the proportions on the model once it is done. That is a thing that would require changing all the physics as well, and I would just have to spend about $300 or $400 on another model in order to make this one happen. But I do still appreciate the suggestion. I do still appreciate it. I think the design is very, very cute. I love goblins. So, thank you very much for your submission, Zoe. I appreciate it, and hopefully we will see more of your artwork in the future. If you want your fan art to be shown in a future video, the best way to do so is to drop it into the fan art section of the Discord. Oh, and one more thing before we continue. Guys, the first episode of Third Space Arcade featuring me, Anthony Gramalia, and Proton Jane is up for viewing right now. So, if you want to hear all three of us talk about Resident Evil, a video essayist, me being a largely reaction slop YouTuber, and Proton Jane, who is very much a legacy gaming YouTuber and streamer from a very long time ago, just a very, very storied history. If you want to see us talk about some of our favorite video games, then please go check out Third Space Arcade. There's plenty of other creators who will be on board in future episodes talking about other things as well. The Lag Witch has watched it, was good, but hope for something a little longer. The Lag Witch, I have good news. That episode that is out right now is one part of multiple. There's about 5 episodes in the Resident Evil discussion alone. So if you are wanting more discussion from me, Anthony, and Jane, then, well, stay tuned. There is going to be a lot more in there. Each recording session that we do on Third Space Arcade is going to end up being about 3 to 5 episodes total. And yeah, if you guys want to go ahead and check it out, please do so. It is at Third Space Arcade. You can go at 3RDSA and you will find the channel right there that way. So, thank you very much for Anthony and Jane for showing up on that episode and talking about Resident Evil with me. With that said, I want to go ahead and talk about this article. So, Time Magazine, when Orange Was the New Black was a newer show, Time Magazine did an article talking about a very particular trans woman actress. I'm gonna go ahead and read the first bit of this for you right now, and then we're going to get into why this is a little bit funky in hindsight, not because of anything that we think. You'll see. In the Beaux Arts lobby of the Norse Theater in San Francisco, men in deep V-necks and necklaces walk by women with crew cuts and plaid shirts buttoned on top. Boys carrying pink backpacks kiss on the lips, while long-haired ladies whose sequined tank tops expose broad shoulders snap selfies. About 101,000 people 1,100 people, many gleefully defying gender stereotypes, eventually pack into the auditorium to hear the story of an unlikely icon. Boy, howdy, just men having pink backpacks and also being gay. That defies gender stereotypes from 12 years ago? Man, we have come a long, long way. Anyway, Laverne Cox began by saying, I stand before you this evening a proud African-American transgender woman, and the cheers were loud and long. Almost 1 year after the Supreme Court ruled that Americans were free to marry the person they loved, no matter their sex, another civil rights movement is poised to be challenging long-held cultural norms and beliefs. Transgender people, those who identify with a gender other than the sex they were assigned at birth, to use the preferred phrase among trans activists. Man, I'm so happy that's just become normalized speech now, instead of preferred speech of a type, are emerging from the margins to fight for an equal place in society. This new transparency is improving the lives of a long misunderstood minority and beginning to yield new policies as trans activists and their supporters push for changes in schools, hospitals, workplaces, prisons, and the military. We are in a place now, Cox tells Time, where more and more trans people want to come forward and say, this is who I am. And more trans people are willing to tell their stories. More of us are living visibly and pursuing our dreams visibly. So, people can say, oh yeah, I know someone who's trans, when people have points of reference that are humanizing, that demystifies the differences. Also, Sarah and Serotonin, thank you very much for the follow. Alpha Gamer, thank you for the follow as well. Ansela says, as long as no one is showing reproductive parts in public, who cares? Yeah, I largely agree. But, so, that's as far as we're going to read into the article. That I just want to give you the staging ground for what things felt like back then. Because that article is actually used as the basis for this article from Slate that came out 5 days ago. And the article is, has visibility been a double-edged sword for queer people? And just so you know, I found this from a user on Blue Sky named Daniel Froome, and they posted this right here, which was the LGBTQ movement pursuit of visibility a mistake? Which apparently was the original way that this was titled. So take that for what you will. Let's go ahead and begin. When trans actress and advocate Laverne Cox appeared on the cover of Time magazine in 2014 under the banner The Transgender Tipping Point, it appeared that progress towards LGBTQ equality was moving forward steadily, and in some areas, relatively rapidly. Marriage equality, in particular, was advancing through individual states, and the Supreme Court would take it nationwide with Obergefell's decision the following year. Meanwhile, queer people were increasingly featured positively in media and pop culture. Cox's cover story, which was tied to her buzzy role in Orange is the New Black, was indeed such a milestone. Visibility was the watchword of the day. Cox herself defined the ethos well. More of us are living visibly and pursuing our dreams visibly, so people can say, oh, I know somebody who is trans. That's why we looked at the article first. A decade and two Trump administrations later, the situation for trans and queer folks looks very different. In a recent interview with NPR's Fresh Air tied to the new memoir, Cox put it this way: after 2023, it became very clear to me that trans people had lost the culture, she said. I knew this was the beginning of a disaster in terms of policy. The dehumanization was so clear to me. The political and cultural whiplash we're feeling today, in which anti-trans legislative attacks and gross demagoguery are core tenets of Republican ideology in a way they never had been before, has spurred many to wonder if the push for visibility, often fueled by corporate brands and media interests, has been as good for queer people as was promised. In the excerpt conversation below, which has been edited and condensed for clarity, Brian Lauder, Christina Catarini, and June Thomas gather for a final episode of the Outward podcast to discuss the thorny question of where visibility politics has really gotten us. So, okay, let's go ahead and put the brakes here real quick. Do you know what this reads as to me? Just personally, as somebody who's not trans, as somebody who's cis, as somebody who does not have these lived experiences, this reads to me like victim blaming. Now, maybe that was not the original intent of the author, but to me, reading this, it sounds a lot like the author at least poising the idea that maybe your racist uncle learning that trans women exist is actually the reason she lost her rights, really. Irrespective of the fact that the people who are causing her to lose her rights are the Republican Party and the people that support that, and not, the trans person simply being visible in society. I'm beginning to see a lot more Brianna woos coming out of the woodwork because of that verbiage. But again, maybe that's not the original intent of the article. Let's go ahead and read the synopsis, or not the synopsis, but what is said between the different podcasters here. Brian Lauder says, a theme that we definitely talked about many different times on the show is visibility. When we started, I would say that it was a sort of a major goal, at least as the professional movement, activists, nonprofits, that kind of world would have articulated. That visibility was a goal, and it was pitched as the way that we would turn hearts and minds in our favor, and that we would be protected because people would get used to us, come to love us, that kind of thing. We were supposed to be out, proud, get on TV, etc. In 2026, I feel pretty strongly that the strategy has failed, or at least proven to be far more trouble than we thought. No, it has not failed. So, I'm going to go ahead and do a thing real quick. Pew Research on trans acceptance by year. Just real quick, I want to take a look at this. This is social acceptance in 2025. Marco says, considering chuds go into an apologetic blood-boiling rage over Dylan Mulvaney getting one beer can with her face on it, there's an amount of slow or gradual implementation of change that they would take without going into a feral Wolverine berserker rage. There's no amount of gradual implementation that would do it. So, see here, percent of LGBTQ adults saying that there's a of social acceptance in this country today. A great deal of social acceptance today. So, trans people, 13%. Gay or lesbian people, 61%. Bisexual people, 52%. Now, I wonder if we have the numbers for, say, 2012, before Oberg fell. Or maybe we do 2014, so it's right after Oberg fell, specifically. Goat Guy TM, thank you for the follow. Thank you very much for the follow. All right, so we are going to put a pin in that real quick, and we are going to look for this exact same thing by 2014. What does that look like? They did not conduct a standalone major survey dedicated to transgender social acceptance. Instead, it was abreast in larger surveys and specialized in academic research. So let's instead look at that, since this is the best we're going to get. By the way, can I just say the fact that there even is a distinction with trans people and people who are just gay as something that Pew Research has to acknowledge, that actually is a major thing. That is a major thing. That's what visibility does. You get to actually get more accurate representation. So, let's see here. This is points of discrimination, people who are in the closet, the coming out experience. Let's see here. That's just an amount who describe themselves as. How many people know? Percent saying their sexual orientation is mainly something positive. Okay, so this is same-sex marriage, which is not necessarily the exact thing that we should be looking at, but it may be the only thing that we have that we can utilize. Self and country. Most religious groups seen as unfriendly. What's the best way to pursue equality? Community engagement. Online behaviors. Okay. So we're not going to find the percentage of people that believe that they are accepted because Pew Research did not do that. So we are going to have to do a bit of a smidgy substitute, which isn't perfect, but okay. Percentage of people that favor or oppose gay and lesbian people to marry legally. 42% opposed, 51% favored. Do you think more gay and lesbian couples raising children is a good or bad thing? 35% considered it bad, 21% considered it good, and 41% considered it no difference. So now, let's see if Pew Research, same-sex marriage, 2026. I guess we'll just have to go with Gallup polls, which might use a different set of criterion. Support for legal same-sex marriage is down 6 points from 2022 to 2023, which means that it started going down because of the Trump administration. Oh boy, howdy. That's another point that visibility is not the problem. It's the administration that's actually pushing shit. It's that one. Okay, 1 second. See here, while most Americans still favor same-sex marriage, the 65% who do so is down 6%. Okay, so visibility as a strategy in 2022 and 2023 had gotten us to 71% 71% in favor of versus 51% in favor of. Okay. Mephron says, I believe the majority of the reasons for backlash is a particular band of idiots needing someone to blame for their failures and distract from their ideas. They're seeing trans people as the new targets. Yeah, no, that's... So, a key point of fascism always is to find a societal ill that you can blame on a section of society and then aim all of your ire at that instead of actually fixing problems. That's fairly standard thing across, well, again, generally all of those regimes. But okay, so different research polls, maybe they had different criterion, but the only thing that we're able to actually get as a good, cohesive one to the other is marriage acceptance. And marriage acceptance has gone up 20% until you hit the most recent Trump administration. So, man, let's see here. 2016, bop, bop, up, down in 2019, bop, bop, up again. Okay, and as far as I am concerned, percentage that says that changing one's gender is morally acceptable. So 46% in 2021 and a drastic decline by the time you get to 2026. That means that the number was higher in previous years, but once we started seeing a lot of the concerted efforts against trans people in media, that changed. Because if you remember, 2016, we started having a lot of the bathroom and sports debates. At the end of the Trump administration, we got Biden, and suddenly there was a increased fervor in right-wing media to aim at these areas of acceptance as the areas that needed to be just bopped down. So those numbers make sense to me as well. There are two things that we can accept. Either we get right-wing media that is getting more virulent during this area, so you see an increase in acceptance in gay marriage, but a decrease in acceptance. Actually, the decrease starts around the same time. The decrease in acceptance for gay or lesbian relations starts at the exact same time as the decrease of people who think that it's morally acceptable to change your gender. So, these two things have straight correlatives because any support of the LGBTQ community largely encompasses all or most aspects of it. You don't get very many LGBs without the T's unless they're fucking astroturfing. Okay, so this reads to me that visibility is not the problem. Visibility has largely been a success. It is largely the counteraction to visibility that has been the problem. Said, hey kids, you remember when CRT was the boogeyman? I remember. Says, I think this is especially true for trans people, and I know a lot of trans people have said this, so I'm not just making this up. There was not really a meaningful anti-trans movement in this country before the so-called trans tipping point. Anti-trans politics is a major plank of the Republican Party, probably the major plank, honestly. I mean, it's all they talk about, and certainly as we come up to the midterms, they're talking about it more and more. So it seems like maybe there was a value not in, I don't want to say staying closeted, but maybe in working for liberation and material needs in more local community level areas, less PR-focused ways, and I think there's a lot to say about how corporations exploited this model and then dropped it, as we've definitely seen. So the problem has been corporations and how they've done rainbow capitalism, and the problem is the Republican Party and their response to this, not the visibility itself. Are you saying that if you had just stayed invisible and the numbers of acceptance had remained low, then things would just be better at that point? Because that sounds really awfully fucking stupid. Tezora says, there wasn't an anti-trans movement before 2020? No. They didn't even say that. They didn't even say before 2020. They didn't even list a date here. So that would be a bit of a misrepresentation of the article. Because they didn't list a date here at all. They just pointed out that in recent years it's become the major plank of the Republican Party. Which it largely has been. That part is true. June Thomas says, I'm very torn about this because I do think that especially around trans issues, there's a kind of division between people being exploited because, well, trans people are people, and yet when the Republican Party uses them, they're not thinking about them as human beings. It's just an issue that they are exploiting. And at the same time, I've heard for many years from trans activists that trans activism is best when it kind of happens under the radar. That people are talking to companies, they're talking to politicians, they're talking and they're not doing it with a big ta-da. They're doing it not in secret either, but quietly, because attention doesn't necessarily bring better results. But then I also think that we mustn't forget what has already happened, what has already changed. When I think about visibility, I think of things that honestly are quite banal, like the fact that I truly believe that Glee caused more benefits for gay people than most politicians, probably more than Harvey Milk, because everyone... Okay, there's a cutoff there. All right, so there's another data point we need to look at in order to talk about this, and that would be our data points on visibility. Visibility normalization of LGBTQ. Let's see here. Study. Gideon says, this is infuriating. It sounds like protests shouldn't be seen or heard. Yep. Okay, so the Journal of Quantitative Description from Digital Media actually has something to say about this. LGBTQ visibility is often discussed, but rarely a quantified concept. Here we operationalize visibility as the prevalence of active social media accounts with LGBTQ signifiers in their profile bio and measure the prevalence of such accounts consistently and persistently at daily resolution over 12 years in the United States. We found that prevalence for the signifiers of LGBTQ increased, the term gay grew more rapidly, accounts with LGBTQ signifiers were especially visible on days corresponding with political or violent events. The rainbow flag emoji also increased in prevalence, including a notable ratchet each June. This work is a case study in ipsology, the study of human identity using large data sets and computational methods. Social scientists should embrace ipsology as a new opportunity to observe how people describe themselves and their public audience. So that may not be exactly what we're looking for. That's just showing signifiers. That's not quite what I want. Does LGBTQ visibility lead to acceptance study? All right. Okay. I adore when I try to go into a article and then it just gives me a big paywall thing. Fuck off, die. Okay. GLAAD released results of its 2024 Visibility Perceptions in Advertising Survey. Let's see here. Finds 90% of advertising executives say it's very important to include LGBTQ people in advertising, along with an 80% increase in industry sentiment that LGBTQ people are very important to their business. So that's also not quite what we're looking for. That's not quite what we're looking for. Reuters has one from 2020, so a little older than what I would want. It's titled LGBTQ Visibility Builds Acceptance Research Finds. We're going to look at that and see. Man, I kind of wish that... I mean, it's an article, not the study. So do they have the study here? Fuck off. Americans are more likely to accept LGBTQ plus people if they see them portrayed in film, television, advertisements, said a survey released on Wednesday. Findings that support, say, illustrate the benefits of visibility in the LGBTQ community. So this would be 6 years after that article. Nearly half of those who saw LGBT images in the media were more receptive of gay, lesbian, bisexual, and trans people compared with a third who had not seen those images, according to research of Procter & Gamble, which was the consumer goods giant, and GLAAD, a US-based LGBTQ plus nonprofit. Okay, the findings, they surveyed 2,000 non-LGBTQ adults. The findings come amid debate in the U.S. between rights advocates who back LGBTQ plus visibility and right-wing groups that oppose the images in mass media. The findings of this study send a strong message to brands and media outlets that including LGBTQ people in ads, films, and TV is good for business and good for the world. That's so cool. Give me the numbers. Give me the numbers. I want the numbers. Companies that included them were viewed favorably nearly by 70% of respondents. A number of companies have spoken out against laws that hinder them, like Amazon, Nike, etc. That's so cool. Why would you not link to the study, Reuters? I want the study. So it's a, 2020 GLAAD study? Why is it not fucking linked here? Study LGBT visibility. I hate knowing that the study that I'm looking for is there. Highest percentage of included films, around 8-year projects. That's just the amount of them. Studio Responsibility Index. Why the fuck would you not link to the fucking study? I'm sorry. That upsets me. And now I'm being asked to allow ads. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. Okay. So we're just going to have to take it on its word, I guess. Which I hate having to do. I would rather read the study. I'd rather look at the numbers. I'd rather see what it fucking says, because anybody writing on this shit could easily be wrong, especially when the study is saying something that I want to agree with. I'd really like to fact check it. That would be so cool. But I guess saying a study exists and then not actually linking it is a good practice, Reuters. Okay, sure thing. So bear in mind, though, that study was done in 2020. And when we looked at the data from before, the data showed that 2020 onwards is when we started to see our decline in both representation and how that representation was perceived by people. Now, how many of these correlates are causative, I could not tell you. But what I can say is that visibility isn't the fucking problem. If anything, it's part of a solution. I'm willing to just say that as a hit fire at this point, even if it may or may not be true, because the data seems to suggest that it's true. As much as I would have liked to read the data specifically, so I'm just hedging at this point. Fuck off. Reuters. Okay. Also, this trans activism happens better when it's under the radar thing. Who the fuck did you talk to? Brianna Wu? She goes, God, I know, my God, am I canceled now? Because every Wednesday night or whatever night of the week it was on, there were just gay people on TV, and they were very attractive gay people, which didn't hurt. But I truly think that just seeing people and just seeing that, oh, it's just a relationship, seeing that, oh, it's just a relationship that as bonkers as it seems, really does make a huge difference. And yeah, it does. It does. And the fact, too, that there are many more trans people feeling that they don't have to hide something that they know so well at an early age or whatever age, that it's something that is no longer so terrifying that they have to keep it a secret and try to lamp it down, even in themselves. That's good. Jim Anon says, right-wingers tell LGBTQers to not be visible, therefore visibility has to be good. Yeah, that too. Christina says, I think it's a good point. I feel two very strongly opposing ways about this. One of which is that you're right, the visibility has helped people understand what being trans or queer is. When I was reporting my season of Slow Burn in 2024 about Harvey Milk and the Briggs Initiative in California in the 70s, there were just so many people who were like, I didn't know what being gay was. I just thought something was weird about me. Now, I think about that Time magazine cover with Laverne Cox as akin to the George W. Bush Mission Accomplished banner. It's almost meme-worthy now because, like, oh God, how wrong it was. But still, especially for young... Okay, can we put a kibosh on that? Because it wasn't wrong. It was correct until a concerted effort was made to put a kibosh on it. That means that everything was working as intended, and then the Koch brothers and PragerU and every single media apparatus that learned how to actually, like, keep trans people down started pushing super hard for this with their lobbying and with the people that they paid off in the fucking Supreme Court. This is a completely different concept than Mission Accomplished, yet it is. Also, the Mission Accomplished thing would have been something that's, like, largely measurable, whereas trans acceptance is less measurable. So, also, if the trans tipping point, if the want is for there to be more trans acceptance today than there was in 2014, guess what? There is more acceptance today than there was in 2014. Even with politicians throwing every single thing they can at the wall to hurt trans people, by and large, being trans and being gay are considered more socially acceptable now than they were 12 years ago. Not as accepted as they were 6 years ago, when we started to see the downward trend. But at that point, we start trying to figure out, okay, well, what caused the downward trend? Because it's not the visibility. Because if it was the visibility, then we would have seen the downward trend begin far sooner. It would have been far quicker from that 2014 moment. Carrot K says, we're winning slowly, but winning. The acceptance numbers have gone down since 2020 by 6%. We're not winning right now because the numbers are going down. We're winning when the numbers are going up. We are doing better in the battle than we were in 2014. We are not winning at the moment. My problem is that the people talking in the Slate article are arguing that maybe it was learning that trans people exist that caused them to stop winning. Okay. On the other hand, I completely agree with you that visibility for trans people who just wanted to live their lives, not necessarily stealth or anything, but literally just live without being a political movement and a hyper-politicized identity as an issue, visibility has been terrible. Right, so, learning that black people are normal was bad for civil rights. My God, that sounds fucking stupid when I say it, doesn't it? Because it's fucking stupid, regardless of who's saying it. I've been thinking a lot about why it was so different for LGBT. Anytime that I read it written that way, a red flag goes up. Maybe there's context, but the red flag has been raised. I've been thinking about why it was so different for LGB people, because I guess it's because they're trying to say, like, it's bad for trans people, but it was worse for LGB people. That's why. I just have a red flag that comes up whenever I see the acronym. People, because that was Harvey Milk's big strategy to come out, and it worked. That was why gay rights movement wasn't quashed in its early stages, because people came out and everybody realized, oh, queer people are all around us, and they're pretty okay. But I think trans identity really threatens the underpinning of gender and gender hierarchy in a way that gay identity only kind of brushes up against. You know, actually, that sounds fairly accurate. That one, I think, is actually fairly true, because there's a section of people who are obsessed with hierarchy and obsessed with gender roles, and, like, when you see a trans woman giving breast milk to her baby, you know, that might piss some people off, especially when you realize that that's now technically a lesbian relationship. And you might have the weird thought of, shouldn't the cis woman be giving the breast milk? The milk's the same from either teat, you fucking dumbass. Sean says, oh, that's a misunderstanding of how the gay rights movement works. Right. It's trying to erase trans people from Stonewall. It's really trying, this feels like the whole, like, let's erase trans people from Stonewall shit. You can see issues that the right has pinpointed, like gender-segregated spaces, sports, and bathrooms, and for a political movement that is really invested in a gender hierarchy and gender norms, transness is super threatening. They can make the argument that this really threatens our way of life in a way that gay marriage or whatever doesn't. Actually, they make the argument that gay marriage threatens their way of life too. How many times have you heard the phrase, and I quote, "This is an assault on marriage"? Tell Bunny says, oh, I had more than a couple be upset at me for endangering their rights. Either everybody has rights or no one has them. Rights aren't rights when they can be stripped away at a populist whim. Yeah. Carrot Cake says, the part that is wild to me is that after we found the files in the files that show the Epstein class were astroturfing opposition to trans rights to drive us into sex work so we could be abused, everyone just kind of went, oh, well, we still hate you, shrug. Yeah, again, it feels like saying, oh, the visibility was the problem. No, the fuck it wasn't. No, it wasn't. It's the fact that a concerted strategy was used against trans people. Don't fucking blame trans people for this shit. That's dumb. It's 15 different flavors of dumb. There are fewer flavors of Kool-Aid than there are flavors of stupid in that statement. Epstein, let me see here. Surely there's something in here. Oh, boy. Released by the DOJ, the Advocate report extensive contacts between Jeffrey Epstein and Dr. Jess Ting, a prominent New York City gender-affirming surgeon at Mount Sinai. The records detail a year-long relationship that included visits to Epstein's private island, consultations, and a $50,000 grant to the hospital to support research. The unredacted documents said that there were many references to, limited but significant references to trans people. Documents reveal Epstein's financial and social ties to controversial medical professionals in gender-affirming care, as well as one highly publicized case of a trans victim being exploited by the network. Oh boy. I'm going to support this research so that I can get more, I'm not going to say the disparaging term, but just the one that people associate with Thailand. That one. Let's see here. Correspondence in the files exposed dehumanizing emails exchanged between Epstein and controversial evolutionary biologist Robert Trivers regarding transgender biology and sexual minorities. Epstein notably provided financial backing to Trivers' research. Interesting. Let's go ahead and... Who is this? What is the controversy where this person is considered? Rutgers teaching controversy. Okay, so nothing to do with trans people there. That's just people who happen to be prominent and therefore connected to Epstein. Neato. Marco says, hey, look, a very relevant comic. Oh, I've seen this one. We finally did it. We outlawed all the trans people and drag queens. Happy to be of service. So who are we going after next? I said, who's next? Who? Yep. Bit like that. Bit like that. Let's not start blaming Mount Sinai for this. The center provides invaluable services to trans people. They shouldn't have to suffer because of Ting. The issue of gender-affirming care for youth is completely separate from the pedo stuff. Okay, so I see what's happening here. So Jess Ting is the one who basically made the peritoneal vaginoplasty surgery, and he's apparently all over the Epstein files, and it looks like there is some effort, or was some effort, to say that even the doctors of the evil trans people are pedophiles. Look at their connections to Epstein, when really the Epstein thing just shows that everybody with any ounce of money is fucking corrupt. That said, it's weird because I haven't seen a concerted effort on the right to try to use this information against trans people yet. Maybe I'm just not looking in the right place, but I haven't seen it. This was like 5 months ago, so maybe I just didn't catch it when it happened. But do you think they just kind of tried to ignore the files as best they could on the MAGA side? Because this would have been a really easy, not easy dunk because it's dumb, but like for their group, an easy dunk. Everybody in the MAGA circle would have considered that an easy dunk. Access, I think I have once, but that's it. Orla says, you think the government's really going to try to use Epstein files because apparently it's come out that Trump has actually mentioned in there more than 1 million times more than 1 million times instead of what we were told before. I think they would avoid it like the plague. Fair. Tazor says, probably because the strat at the time was ignoring the files altogether. Yeah, fair. That makes sense. That's probably why I didn't see it a whole lot. They're basically saying, even though this would be something that, like, MAGA could have used as a way to, like, go, aha, see? The trans predators are predators. Look at the Epstein stuff. But I didn't see that, so. Dorita says, speaking of files, Blanche has until Thursday to release the rest of the files. Gotcha. Okay. Back to the article at hand. Said, I also think about this in terms of representation, where on the podcast, I've been more skeptical of the value of representation and firsts and stuff in movies. The exclusively gay moment in Disney movies, or like people breaking the glass ceiling or whatever the gay version of that is, the mesh ceiling, I don't think that's doing the most for us either. It turns out representation in politics only really does a lot when you have a robust and functioning democracy, which we don't really have right now. And so while I think that it's certainly valuable to have queer and trans people at the table in politics, I'm just a little skeptical it's done much for us. I think that that's dumb. Once again, I think that that's dumb. You're basically saying, because right-wingers got mad about a gay kiss in Buzz Lightyear, that is the reason that that we don't have good things happening for the gays and trans people right now. Like, no. You already isolated the problem. The problem is the people who are involved in our supposed democracy. You've already isolated the issue right here. So pivoting to, maybe it's the fact that they knew we existed. People knew gay and trans people existed before that. And they still had fucking laws about it. Fuck off. June says, I just think we have to think of the possibility. Would it have been better if there had not been visibility? And I don't think it would have. Thank you. I also think that we shouldn't act like our opponents, the people who are cynically exploiting the humans, other humans for their own ends. Whatever they are acting in good faith. So for us to take a sort of reasonable view of what has helped us and what has hurt, no. Just one of the things that you mentioned, which I know is a big talking point for the anti-trans forces, women in sports, since when have they given a shit about women's sports? There's that great video recently outside some Supreme Court argument, somebody going around and asking the protesters and the people who are supporting the anti-trans legislation or whatever, who's your favorite woman athlete? And they're like, I don't know. So it's cynical. I think it must be incredibly difficult to be a visible trans person right now. I can't even imagine it, but that doesn't mean that visibility is bad. It's the most effective tool we have. I think, but it's also very hard for those people who are asked to be visible. Brian says, as y'all been talking, I've been thinking that kids do need models, right? As Christina was saying, we do need to be able to imagine ourselves as whatever we're going to be under the LGBTQ umbrella. And so if you don't have any visibility, that doesn't really work. But maybe we can draw a distinction between, let's say, organic visibility, where it's people just living their lives openly in your community, and then the kind of visibility that was really exploited by brands and corporations, which kind of plastered gay people and then trans people a little later for 3 years or so on billboards for Pride and made this big deal about it. There's actually wasn't about advancing equality or acceptance or anything like that. It was about capitalizing on a trend in a moment. And I think that's probably the kind of visibility that didn't do anybody any favors. So I can agree with that take, because rainbow capitalism, for those who don't know, rainbow capitalism is the idea that as a minority gets accepted more, then they become a group that has voting power, staying power, buying power, and as a result, they are worth advertising to, and oftentimes they are advertised to by showing support of them. Rainbow capitalism is a good thing, not because it does good, but because it is an indicator that the tides are moving in a good direction. Rainbow capitalism is a canary in a coal mine, albeit not the greatest one that we have access to. If the rainbow capitalism stops, it tells you a lot about the norms and culture of the region, which is why if you look in China, rainbow capitalism doesn't fucking happen there. At least not for gay and trans people. But it does happen here. It's a barometer of acceptance. It is not a goal. It is not a tool, other than the fact that it is a measuring device. Antolin says they only want trans people in their porn. They're too afraid of them in their bedrooms. Like, okay, I will be the first one to say there is some pretty hot transgender porn out there, but there's also some pretty hot cis porn and porn of every other variety, and I have certainly purchased porn of my own partner, so I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about at this point. What I can say, looking through all of this, it seems like the Slate article at least got to that trans porn do be slapping lately. Yeah, that's the sound of the cheeks. But at least they did kind of get to the point, which is that, hey, the issue specifically is the way the visibility is being utilized, and the issue specifically is the politicians that are exploiting it and the corporations that are exploiting it. I don't need all of the speakers to come to a consensus of the podcast, because a consensus among speakers the entire time is just kind of boring. But hey, it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be when I read it. That title definitely threw me for a loop, though. Anyway, now that we're done with that one, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing, maybe checking out some of the other channels. There's Third Space Arcade. I talked about that earlier. Go check that out. Stop watching this video. Hey, you made it to the end. I want to give an extra thanks to the patrons who allow me to do this full time. I want to thank Aaron Rail, Astral, Britzkrieg, Jemshin, Poundini, Red Joker, Victoria, Jonas, Craig, Tarika, Fireshard, Smiling GM, John, Dren Hadamada, Creeper, Sagitta, you know I'm not saying that last part, Sylvie Snow, Valis of Seraph, Ottoman Angel, Rooster Rachel, and Fire Panda, who are all my $20 and up patrons.